Welcome to Floyd Street's Finest. He is Holy Cross head coach, former Louisville assistant Mark Lieberman. I am Jack Grossman. Coach, big game coming up tonight. You guys got the sales we were talking about right before we started recording.
Yep. In between catching up on Louisville film so I could know what I'm talking about. Yep. Just prepping our guys. Big game tonight. Really looking forward to it. I know Coach Rummage is really excited. Didn't want to pull a Doug Gottlieb, so I had to make sure I did my yeoman's work on making sure I'm prepared and watching as much film as possible and actually having practices with our guys and getting things done. So
that's one of the wilder things Doug Gottlieb tried to run a college program doing that. Like, I appreciate that you're able to still make time for me and we're able to do the podcast. Yes, but like I do
know, Jack.
I know.
And
yeah,
listen,
but I don't know how Doug Gottlieb does that. That's insane.
You've been patient with me, and you get it because I'll text you and say, look, we've had something come up, or I've got a meeting with our guys, or I've got film where I got to go scout a game, and I'm at the high school level, and I understand having coached 6 years of Division I basketball. I mean, it's consuming, and you have to put things on hold, and you've got to say no to certain things. And I understand if you want to be great, and winning is not normal, and winning is hard. And look, I don't know Coach Gottlieb, but man, just the optics of even like this week, with whatnot, especially when you're not playing well. I mean, it's like one of those situations where, you got to invest, and players know that. Players have BS antennas, and they know, your commitment as well. So anyway, it's a very precarious situation that he finds himself in.
It really is. I don't think they've won a game since December. If I'm correct there, the last time I checked, that's how it was. But that's wild. We don't need to talk any more Doug Gottlieb, though. There's enough discussion on that. We're here to talk Louisville basketball. Cards back in the win column on Wednesday night against Boston College. We'll lead with that. We'll also hit on Georgia Tech, some other big picture thoughts as well. Catching up on your thoughts from kind of the 10-game win streak and how the Cards were playing before that game in Atlanta, which I was at. Which maybe I should stop going to games because I've been to 2 games this year, to Georgia Tech and Ole Miss. So maybe I'm the bad juju there. But I want to leave this. Chucky Hepburn gets hurt around the 15-minute mark of the second half, and he's on the bench. It didn't look too serious. I'm by no means a doctor. You're by no means a doctor. We're not going to sit here and procrastinate and try to make guesses on if he's going to miss time, how long he would miss time, and all that type of stuff. But first of all, Louisville can't survive without Chucky Hepburn for a long period of time, but it was impressive to see kind of how they reacted in a 1-game, 15-minute sample size without Chucky Hepburn, Terrence Edwards Jr., Devon Hadley kind of playing, booty ball. Jalen Pickett, Penn State style from a couple years ago, Marcus Domask in Illinois from last year. That's kind of what it looked like. It was, let's give it to our oversized ball handlers. They're going to back people down and either finish for themselves or, if help comes, kick it out for a 3. And it worked really well. The two of them scored or assisted on Louisville's next 15 points. It sparked a run, and Louisville outscored Boston College actually by 17 points the rest of the way to turn that into a kind of uncomfortable yet comfortable lead to just an absolute blowout, which is kind of what Louisville needed after Saturday at Georgia Tech.
Well, they have a bunch of tough guys, and you talked about it, and they have some veteran players, of course, so that's going to be a huge factor. But when you look at it too, Jack, and just watching that whole game, you look at them from a defensive standpoint, and look, Chucky is tremendous with ball pressure, but just watching them and watching James Scott's effort to just help him recover. Terrence Edwards, 2 places at once, and just him causing a turnover in the first half because he's going to recover. I showed the film to our players. I had them watch and how everybody has their head on a swivel. Everybody's in a stance. Everybody's alert. Of course, you have on the offensive end, a small sample size. Can you survive without your quarterback for a game? Maybe 2. Of course, it
helps that it's Miami at home on Saturday.
Exactly. So it's a situation where can you survive that? Maybe, but of course they need Chucky if they want to make any type of run in the ACC tournament and of course in the NCAA tournament. But this team gets it, and you talk about a team that just understands who they are, understands how to play. Look, the hiccup at Georgia Tech and getting a chance to watch that. And a quick shout out to Lance Terry, who had 23 points, who played for me at the Heritage School for 3 years, and just a great kid, great young man, and whatnot. But you watch this team, and I'm thoroughly impressed every possession because look, I know you're a numbers guy, and in the analytics, I love the analytical point that you're always so astute with, and you're always up on everything. But some of that is always tied into because they're in a stance, because they're two plays at once, because their heads on a swivel, their defensive possessions and all their numbers and their deflections and their steals and their points per possession is all because of the things that they do. And I know you get that is they're connected. There's no slippage. And even look, it's going to happen. You're not. This team is not a absolute juggernaut of 5 or 6 NBA guys where they can just have moments where they can have slippage and then still survive in some games. They have to play really well and they have to play really hard, and they do that, and that's why they do so well. And that's there's no other way of putting it than this team is truly connected because they're not going to wow you with just individual talent. Just collectively, they just do an amazing job.
Yeah, it's a lot of energy. It's a lot of collective ball pressure too. Chucky Hepburn certainly sets the tone with that. He's a guy that is, I would argue, one of the two, three best on-ball defenders in college basketball. But I think what we've seen is we saw this in the Bahamas, and then after the Bahamas, it was a couple weeks of Louisville having to rediscover itself. But in the stretch since really mid-December on, it's been okay. We're going to pressure the ball. We're going to get in your face. We're going to make you uncomfortable. That's not just Chucky Hepburn. That's something that, Terrence
Mm-hmm.
Edwards has really taken
Yep.
great strides, and Javon Hadley's been really effective at. Traore coming off the bench as well. I think that's kind of a bigger picture thought. The big difference between Louisville and Kentucky, not that Kentucky doesn't play hard, and yes, Louisville's not playing nearly as good a competition in the ACC as Kentucky's playing in the SEC, but Kentucky without Lamar Butler, we've seen even with Lamar Butler beforehand, they just don't, other than Butler, they don't pressure the ball and they don't make you uncomfortable. And that's why, I've kind of had this bigger thought about Lamar Butler in Kentucky. Whenever he comes back, that doesn't magically fix everything from UK because they're not as connected on the defensive end as Louisville is. They don't have other guys that are able, again, Lamar Butler, like Chucky Hepburn, one of the two, three best on ball defenders in the country. But with Kentucky, you can attack Chandler, Travis Perry, Andrew Carr, all these other guys. With Louisville, you have dudes that are able to pressure the ball and are able to stay in front of the offensive players when they're driving. And I think that's kind of the big difference between those two teams right now is that other guys have stepped up. And I don't think there's a better point of that. I'm not saying Louisville would necessarily beat Kentucky in a rematch. I think it'd be a different game possibly than what we saw the first time, depending on, health of both teams for sure. But Louisville, we've seen they can, I guess, against a not very good Boston College team, they can still have that intensity and set the tone on the defensive end, whereas Kentucky's really struggled with that.
Yeah, look, you mentioned the fact that yes, Kentucky is playing in a monster of a league.
An incredible league.
But of course, look, you're having to defend guys who can just get to the rim in 1 or 2 dribbles, and when you're closing out, helping recovering, you got 6'8", 6'9" guys who are knocking down shots. Having said that, it doesn't matter. You have to be unselfish defensively, and it doesn't matter who you're playing. And if there's angles, Jack, even if it's arm's distance, whether you're tracing the face and bothering the ball in some capacity. You look at Louisville, one of the first possessions where the Rain Smith sets a great back screen for James Scott, and Chucky throws that lob. There's no ball pressure on Chucky whatsoever. And, the Boston College players' hands are dead. And when you watch Louisville, their hands are active, and they're one of the most unselfish defensive teams because they know they can pressure, because they know there's somebody to shrink a gap. They know someone's ready to erase one of their mistakes, and they're always alert. You watch the film, and again, I hark back to watching it with our players and showing them every possession defensively where this team is locked in. There's not guys whose backs are turned, who are late and lazy. This team is alert. With Boston College setting, again, that's something I wouldn't do against a Louisville team is constantly set ball screens or set double highs or drags because of how well Louisville defends that, especially with Chucky. But you watch James Scott show him recover, and here's a Hadley taking 2 steps towards the ball screen to buy him half a second for him to recover, to swipe and stunt and recover back out. They're so connected, and it's fun to watch. And regardless of Kentucky's league, I mean, you have to be unselfish. You have to trust your teammates. You have to pressure because no matter what, guys are just too good to just be able to see the floor and be able to create plays.
It really is. You talk about Louisville's ball string defense. It's not quite a Virginia traditional high hedge of what they're doing, but they do such a great job with the bigs. I mean, Case Pryor was fantastic at this before he got hurt as well. But
Mm-hmm.
Scott, Triore, Connie Roots,
Yeah,
they all are able to get out there, disrupt the flow of the offense, recover to the big guy. Louisville does a great job of tagging on the back end as well to take away an easy roll, and then they can rotate out as well. So I mean, it's very connected on that end of the floor. On the other end, if you don't pressure the ball, they're going to bury you. I mean, you brought up the
mm-hmm.
lob to Scott. I was thinking of, you said that reminded me of a play where Edwards got a screen after passing the ball off from Scott, curled to the basket. No ball
Sure.
pressures on Chucky. He's able to lob it up to Edwards. Now you got a paint touch, and he kicks it out to, I believe, Javon Hadley or Smith or someone who hits an open three. That was part of Louisville's 10-0 run. Weird game
Yep.
of runs. Louisville had a 12-0 run. BC had an 8-0
Yeah.
run. Then Louisville has a 10-0 kill shot. And then BC had another 8-0 run in that first
Well,
half.
yeah, and now it's in the
Yep.
first half, it's 19-14, and then it goes to 10-0 run by right. It's
Yep.
it's it's 19-6, and here comes the run by Boston College, but then Louisville goes on their run, and again, just watching them. And look, I'll say this for Rain Smith, him coming through the elevator screen is a great action, and how they run it and
I
so
am
on.
so happy you brought that up.
Okay, if you'd like to,
No.
oh,
I was going to ask you about it. So please. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but what he does, look, he is never sensitive. He's a great screener, and if you're a great screener, especially as a shooter, and because Louisville runs such good offense, and guys are not standing still, and they run their diagonal shuffle cuts, they run pin downs, they run misdirections. Chucky is really crafty with the ball. James Scott is constantly screening, rescreening, and rolling, and he always rolls hard. How many times have I said the first play of the summer is him sprinting to the rim when Case Pryor lifts? You watch them. So if you're going to just decide, okay, we're just not going to let Rain Smith shoot, even though, again, his numbers weren't great, he's still always a threat. If you're going to play 4-on-4, you're going to be in trouble because you talked about just butting guys down around the rim. You have guys that can isolate, whether it's Edwards or Hadley, but you also have guys who are great screeners, who can create, who can move. This team doesn't stand still. They're hard to guard. And when you have that, you take a play off, I mean, they're going to find the open guy. This team is always has their head on a swivel, and they're looking to make the right play, not the play for themselves, the right play.
There's three things that I look at that I really, really love that Pat Kelsey does. There's more than three things, but just kind of standing out right at the moment. Number one, you brought up the elevator screen. It's early February, and Pat Kelsey's still drawing up new and different ways for sideline out of bounds plays for Rain Smith. I mean, everyone in the building knows that was one of the things I was impressed with that Georgia Tech game was that they were able to take away Rain Smith on the offensive end. We get to that in a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
but but there's once to twice a game there he's able to draw something up out of a timeout to get Rain Smith a bucket. And those are free points. Those are free is kind of an insult to it because it's hard to get when everyone knows that's going to happen, but it's just so impressive how game after game after game they're able to find new ways. And I think one of the ways they're able to do that is because Louisville, as you said, is so good at those screen for the screener actions, rescreening actions is so impressive to be able to get guys open. Not a lot of teams do that. I don't think people realize that teams don't run that type of stuff as effectively as Louisville. The other thing that I love, they're able to lift the defense so well. What do I mean by that? They have all these guys on the perimeter that are threats to shoot. Even James Scott, who's not a threat to shoot threes at this stage in his career, can come in, run that dribble handoff zoom action, can initialize offense, and to where you don't have defenders in the paint. And
Mm-hmm.
Louisville, again, doesn't have the best athletes in the world, but what do you do to try to get around that? You lift you lift your offense, which lifts the defense. It takes defenders out of the paint. It opens up driving lanes. So where it makes it one a lot harder for defenders to come and help and commit to help, a lot longer of a stretch. It puts them in a much bigger rotation, which means you're either going to get, if you can beat a guy off the bounce after 3-4 passes when you've reversed the ball a couple times, where a guy's not having a great angle defensively, it makes it a little bit easier for you to get to the basket and beat your initial guy. You're either going to get a layup or you're going to kick out for an open three every single time. And that's something that, again, aside from the Georgia Tech game, Louisville's really hit their stride with the last few weeks.
You know, Jack, if I get back into college basketball, you're going to be hired just like Woj as my GM.
I would love to
it
do that.
couldn't have been a better breakdown of what you're talking about because yeah, look, they absolutely they're spacing and lifting guys and keeping the floor spread because that opens up driving lanes, whether it's baseline drives, and they're constantly setting hammer screens or back screens on the opposite side. So when guys are not attached, now all of a sudden the first time you get screened in, now you're so cognizant of it. Now you're trying to get over, and so the help isn't as good. And you talk about a team that, look, there's a lot of coaches that can get your team to say, okay, we're not just going to set ball screens and just space the floor. We're going to run some really good actions, whether it's screen-to-screener actions, because that's what Louisville loves to do. But there's constant movements and constant wrinkles that are always added. And again, I went back to the North Carolina game where they ran the Spain action 6 consecutive plays, but it was all different things. One was a ghost screen. One was an invert where now you screen down, and they ran different things off of it. And again, talking about that early in the season, they were not guarding ball screens this way. They weren't hedging out and swiping and recovering, because you had to get these guys to understand it takes time for them to be connected defensively. And you know what? We're good at it. And then you go into practice and realize, you know what? These guys are pretty good at showing and helping, because now they're trusting, and there's an arm across, and they're tagging that role, and they're getting back to the shooters. They're really, really good at it. And then you know what? You realize we can do it even better. And you watch this team; they're improving and they're getting better. And the hiccup that happened in Atlanta, maybe the curse of one Jack Grossman. But regardless, I was on the air with Nick and Phil Baker and on 680 a couple of days ago, right before the game, the day of the game, and I said, look, this team's going to be just fine. You watch that. You watch how they play. You don't see signs of, oh wow, this is something that's going to be this is going to be trouble. No, I just felt this team was going to just get themselves back on track, and I'm not a big believer in that. Oh, losing is going to help you. I'm not one of those guys. The only thing you learn from losing is how to lose. I think this is a situation where this team got really pissed off and said, you know what, we need to come back out and fight. And I just think it showed in the game, especially when you lose Chucky for a significant amount of time.
I think it is impressive that they were in a very similar spot in Boston College. Again, not that Boston College is a great team by any means, but you're playing as the favored team on the road with a double-digit halftime lead. But it kind of felt, again, uncomfortable at times, the way that first half went how run heavy it was both ways. It was a game of runs,
Mm-hmm.
as the classic cliche goes. But to kind of learn their lesson from Georgia Tech of, okay, let's step on their throats. Let's, not give them any hope. What was impressive. And it definitely, I'm with you. I'm not a fan of, well, we lost and we learned our lesson type of deal. I think the only time I can really look at a team and say they lost and that helped them, I go back to 2012 Kentucky when they lost in the SEC title game to Vanderbilt. And that was the first time they had lost a game since early December. And I was like, okay, maybe that's a little bit of a reset for them.
Mm-hmm.
Know that they're mortal type of deal, that they got to play their A game. Then obviously they went on, much to Louisville's chagrin, winning the title that year. But I'm with you. You don't learn anything from losing. You just learn, how not to win. It's
Yep.
yeah. I mean, great.
I'm a big
You know
believer
what
in
not
that.
to
Yeah.
do. What does that help?
Right. You want your team to find a way to come out of it. Even if you play poorly, you have the little things. Even if it's if there's a play that can be defined that, hey, we found this and we got a kill, we got some stops at the end, and we ran good stuff like that. To me, has always been paramount to successful teams. Is they're even if they win ugly, they're winning.
I will say, I do think and again, I have no inside information on any of this. This is just a random dude in Atlanta spewing stuff. There must have been some type of come to Jesus moment after the Ole Miss game about how they defend ball screens and how aggressive they played. Because as you look back, I'm with you. They did not defend ball screens as a team the way that they've done since then. But case in prior was the one dude early in the season. I just look back to the Indiana game, for instance, how much they disrupted IU's offense. And so much of it was case in prior, high hedging ball screens, disrupting the flow of the offense. And it just, Indiana is a weak team mentally as well. How much they're able to just kind of shell shock IU and take them out of that offensive flow early in the game, and a flow they never found throughout the game. It became an absolute laugher of a contest. I think they took that and said, yes, Case Pryor is not there anymore, but there's no reason why James Scott, Waterman, Traore, Connie Roots, Edwards, Hadley, whoever's, defending the ball screen can't do that same thing. And not every team's going to fold like a chair the way Indiana does, but it still just makes it so much harder for an offense to establish their flow, get to the spots they want to. And we've seen Louisville's been at their best when they've played that aggressive style defensively.
Well, I don't think it was so much of a come to Jesus moment. Teams get better, they get worse. And I think that Coach Kelsey is a tremendous teacher in getting these guys to understand that. I think even in the college basketball game, Jack, this game is overcoached and undertaught. So you're just saying, okay, get out there and stop it instead of going through every meticulous detail of getting your butt to the sideline and spurring the guy, which is a term we use, where you're bumping the guy before he even sets the screen and you're attached to his hip and you're understanding that you're communicating, that you're coming out and the guard's going, I'm back. And now you know to take your two. Watch how hard they, after the hedge, whoever it is, whether it's Traore, whether it's Scott, whether it's even Edwards coming out a couple times, because I've seen him do it. Look, they're even Waterman, and you watch them, their first two steps getting back and turning their head on a swivel with high hands as the tag guy is now being replaced by him. Watch that. And that's not something that's just going to happen organically. It's taught. So going back to December, like you have a team that over the last 2 months is working on it. And it's never what you teach, it's what you emphasize. And as they go through it, they get better. It's something they work on. And not to knock any other programs, but this team works. Having seen them practice, knowing what they do, and just talking to, Luke Hancock and I were just talking. He was at practice last week and was just amazed by how hard they're just working continuously, because these guys understand they want to win and they're connected and they care about each other. So when you do that, you're going to play harder and you're going to be a great defensive team in ball screen defense. And I never like to say ball screen coverage. I always like to say ball screen defense, because you said it before, whether it's the tag man, whether it's the guy off the ball taking 2 steps towards it, 2 plays at once, you all have to be connected, whether you're up and denying the ball reversal. So it can't be a reversal and a throw in because the guy's late recovering. It's all part of it. And Louisville teaches it really, really well.
They really do. I do. I want to talk about the Georgia Tech game a little bit. Just because there were just a couple things that I kind of saw that were like, okay, I know they went back and won the Boston College game, but I was like, all right, what's going on here? Why is this happening? And I think the two things I saw, one, offensively, I thought after the first 10 minutes where Louisville could get whatever the heck they wanted in that game, they were at 1.846 points per possession 9 minutes into the game, which is an insane number that was never going to sustain, because Louisville's all shooting like 75% from the field. Like that's just a number that's you can't do that for a full game. That's just
almost
not
like
going
how
to
they
happen.
started the Boston College game almost the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the other reasons why I kind of drew the same conclusions of
Sure.
in a very similar spot to where you start hot, you cool off a little bit just because you're going to come back to earth a little bit. How do you react once that happens?
Right.
I thought the big difference was Georgia Tech did as great a job as anyone's done all year against Louisville, because Louisville's won some slog fests. The West Virginia game back in the Bahamas, that was a slow down type game. Clemson's always going to be a slow down type game. Virginia is always going to be a slow down type game. So Louisville's won 4 games this year where they've played at more of a half court pace. But I thought what Boston College did to really muck it up was they did a phenomenal job of taking Louisville out of transition, really imposing their will on Louisville as far as pace of play and all that stuff. And for the first time all year, really since the Tennessee game, for instance, Louisville kind of abandoned what got them to where they've been. They didn't, play with that normal pace and space that they've had. They didn't have their usual ball movement. They resorted to a lot of one-on-one without reversing the ball, without reversing sides 2-3 times. And what we saw was Louisville taking a lot of tough shots against a
Yep.
really, a Georgia Tech team that's also good at pressuring the ball and is really scrappy is the best way to
Yep.
probably describe them, to where Louisville's stagnant offense, you're not just going to be able to beat guys off the dribble or Traore posting up or all these other things without getting that movement first. I think Louisville kind of forgot that as the game went along against Georgia Tech, and it really ended up costing them for it on that end of the ball. There were defensive issues too, but let's just start offensively there.
Yeah, look, I've watched a few Georgia Tech games before the Louisville game because of my relationship with Lance Terry. So watch them. And there's no other way to put it. They're a scrappy team. They're going to dig in. Like, they had Notre Dame on the ropes, and Notre Dame was able to pull that one out and whatnot. But this team is gonna defend you, and their pace of play. Look, they're gonna make it hard for you. They do a good job of contesting cuts and bumping cutters and really being active and kind of taking you out of the flow of things. And I thought that all of a sudden, after Louisville got off to such a good lead and run and so on, then you kind of have that slippage. And usually Louisville course corrects themselves. And whether it's an alpha timeout or whether it's just those guys because of the senior leadership, and you just saw them just really kind of just not getting the flow. And that's something else. Like when you're taken out and you're not running those actions because you're getting bumped off of a path, or all of a sudden you're not coming off an angle or sprinting to. Louisville does such a good job of running towards the guy who's setting the screen and then veering and reading. And this game, it just was almost like, okay, that's kind of taken away. And so all of a sudden you see Louisville settling for some shots, and it wasn't the same type of offensive flow that you've seen in other games. So you really got to give credit to Georgia Tech from taking them out. And really, we talked about Louisville doing it. You watch this game, and Georgia Tech was locked in a stance. They were just doing a really good job of battling through actions and not allowing them to be taking out of some of the stuff that Louisville likes to run.
What did they do to take away Rain Smith offensively? Because I thought on both ends of the ball, they had a perfect game plan for him. But how were they really to make him kind of a non-factor on the offensive end?
Well, again, I also think it's cyclical. I really do. I mean, it depends. Look, Jack, I don't want to be simplistic about it. If you remember Devendorf talking about how they made a manager be Rain Smith, and even if he got a shot off, the team was running and so on. But when you watch the game, it's almost like, okay, sometimes you got to guard somebody before they have the basketball. And sometimes you have to be alert and understand. You've got to be connected. And if you're just going to react bad things happen when the ball's in flight in basketball, Jack. So when that means, even if it's reversed and all of a sudden now Rain Smith's coming off an action, or he's coming off a handoff, or he's coming off a zoom, or James Scott, who does a really good job of getting him into some things. I just think Georgia Tech was just attached. The guys who were guarding screeners if you watch them, they were arm's lengths. They were swiping and showing. There was different things. Yeah, they were top blocking at times, but really it was just more of just really, if you go back and watch the game, which I had to do because, again, I was kind of consumed with some of our Holy Cross games, but I went back and watched it because I knew that we'd go. I think they were physical with him as well. I think it was just a situation where they weren't letting him get open off of screens either. And that's something he does a really good job of. He'll set a screen, and then he's going to receive another screen. And you saw even at the times where there was a switch or a show, and they just said, he's the guy that we're just not going to let get going. But at the same time, I think if you go back to it, and you watch the film, Louisville would say, well, there were counters to that we could have scored on because they're taking something away. There's something else that's open. So I think it's almost an anomaly, that game. I don't think it's something. Look, he went 2 for 11 against Boston College, but he still was a weapon, and it still creates things for their offense because it's so hard to take everything away of what Louisville does.
It really is. And I think part of it also is how active they made Rain Smith have to be on the defensive end too. I mean, it's hard to go and run offense and do all the things Rain Smith does, where Georgia Tech put him in ball screen after ball screen, attacked him off the dribble, and Rain's a dude. He works his butt off and he tries, but let's just be honest, he's not the best defender in the world, and that's probably kind.
Yeah, that's a great point by you, Jack. We talked about that. That's a situation where you'd probably run a little bit more of, you know what? Let's make him. I've said that. We've said it on the podcast. Make him. Look, Tennessee put him in floppy after floppy, and there was times that it opened so many things up for Tennessee. And if you're going to attack him, he's become a better defender. He understands angles. He does a better job of it. But that's the same thing like I've said with Chucky Hepburn. I don't know why teams will continue to put him in defending ball screens. I'd run him off baseline runners. I'd run him off, make him have to guard different things where he's not. Make him guard back screens. Make him guard those things. Why would you put him simply as, okay, I'm going to put him to guard a ball screen action? But that's a great point by you, Jack. They made him have to work on both ends, and then they made it hard for him on the offensive end. But, yeah, he had to guard some things that he normally is not going to do in the basketball game.
Yeah, and I thought Georgia Tech did as good of a job as any team's done all year, up there with Tennessee. A different way than what Tennessee did. It wasn't the floppy actions. It was, we are going to attack, straight line drive you over and over and over again. And Rain just struggled to stay in front of guys, to be quite honest.
Well, that's always going to be a thing, right? And so that's why this team is connected, because they're unselfish defensively, and he's gotten better understanding angles. Yeah. This is just one of those games where, okay, coming in, Georgia Tech did a really nice job of putting him, isoing him in those type of situations where the help was going to be late.
I do wonder, because I thought a key moment in this game was coming out of the under four timeout. It was a two possession game. Terrence Edwards had a free throw. So you're going to have a defensive possession.
Right.
And I'm not one to say like Pat Kelsey's doing a bad job or anything, that he's been absolutely phenomenal. But the one thing that I can say, like, I might have done something different here was he subbed James Scott out and put Rain Smith back in, going into that defensive possession. I get it. You want the 3-point shooting, all that stuff, but that's where I might have gone offense, defense there, stuck with James Scott in the game. And of course, it's very, I remember telling, I was there with my dad and my brother. It was a group of 9 of us there, at the game, which was fantastic. We had a great weekend, but I turned to my dad. I go, I would have stayed with James Scott there. And Georgia Tech did a great job identifying the matchup, drove right at Rain Smith, got an and one, made it a 3-possession game. And at that point, it felt like Louisville was just kind of climbing uphill at a margin that there just wasn't enough time to make up there. To where I probably would have stuck with James Scott and said, let's have our best defensive lineup on the floor, especially when Rain Smith was not getting the looks he normally is able to get on the offensive end anyways, and say, let's see if we get a stop. We have enough weapons on the other end. You could call a timeout if you want to get Rain back in, if you get the ball back, or maybe there's a dead ball some other way. But I think I would have gone with my best defensive lineup there.
Well, that's why you're going to be my GM, Jack. So, but look, there's always situations where coaches, and again, we don't know what other coaches on the bench said. Okay, schematically, these are things that we're trying to do. But believe me, I've worked and worked with tons of tremendous coaches, and after games, wow, we should have done this, we should have done that. We go back to the film. You know, it's just one of those things where you're in the heat of the moment. There's a reason why they went that way schematically. But did it work out? No. But there's always a reason. But yeah, you can watch it and see it through a lens and say, wow, this probably could have worked better. But yeah, I couldn't give you a definitive answer about why they would go that route. But you know, you're not wrong for thinking, hey, this might work and so on, or just saying this coach is a genius for going that route. So look, it's all part of it because it's always bang bang, and you've got to make instant decisions. You know, there's out of bounds plays on the fly, and you know you've got coaches in your ears, all assistants run line power, run zoom, run line flex, run duff, run A, and you've got to say, okay, you've got to think a play ahead. And I'm sure as Coach Kelsey, because he's been fantastic all year, and everybody you can see off of timeouts, off of special situations, this team has been as good as anybody in the country. So, but you're an analytics guy, so the numbers are not always going to be perfect.
Oh, absolutely not. And again, it's a lot easier for the random schmuck in the 18th row to make a call than the dude that's on the bench. A lot
That's
less
the beauty
pressure
of
on me in
sports, though,
that
right,
spot.
Jack? That's the beauty of it. That's why, that's the old adage. If you start listening to the people in the stands, you're going to be sitting with them.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'm sure he's right a lot more often than I am. I'm absolutely sure of that. I do want to say though, like, it was a very unique crowd, I think is the best way of putting it, just because it's a game in Atlanta, but there were probably about 70-75% Louisville fans there,
oh
just
yeah, all the
because,
buses went down.
Southeast
Yeah,
Christian brought all the buses
yeah.
down. I ran into a friend of mine from high school that I think I've seen like once in the last 8-9 years that was like, yeah, tickets were cheap, flights were cheap. We said, fuck it, let's go down and see a game and see the Cards play. I think the combined with Southeast Christian always doing the bus trip, which is one of the better traditions that Louisville fans do, and
Mm-hmm.
is always a lot of fun. Just the amount of excitement around the program to where you ended up a Georgia Tech home game in Atlanta. Again, Georgia Tech doesn't have a great record, so there's not a lot of excitement there. They're about 70-75% Louisville fans for a true road game, about 6.5 hour drive away. That's
It's awesome. I remember my first year at at Louisville, and we played DePaul.
DePaul.
And all of a sudden, it's kind of like it's an empty arena, and where the energy is kind of it's kind of dead in there, and all of a sudden, it just gets raucous, and it's just a sea of red everywhere. And I just remember that day. It's just like amazing as the buses just came and pulled up. It was just it's unique. It's a really cool thing that Louisville fans do.
Yeah, like we were walking out after the game. We went to a pizza place that's about 15-minute walk from the arena. and we're walking, and it's just bus after bus after bus after bus after bus. There were probably like 10 of them. Like, this is crazy. This is awesome. But made for a really cool environment there, especially with Louisville's playing well early in the game. People were
Sure.
into it. And then, the Georgia Tech fans that are there weren't a lot of them, but they were,
Never is. Yeah.
but they get a little bit more vocal as well when they see that many of the road team fans there too. I did think Lance Terry was spectacular in that game for Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech did a really good job again attacking rain and into the bucket. They also a little bit unconventional these days. They got to that pull-up mid-range game a lot in that game, and it was successful. It worked for them. I mean, they dropped 50 in the second half. Louisville had no answers defensively for what Georgia Tech was doing. So that's a team, if you remember last year, they didn't have a great record, but
Hmm.
at home, even though there's again not a lot of Georgia Tech fans at a lot of these games, they beat Duke, North Carolina, and Clemson at home
Oh
last
yeah.
year.
Oh yeah.
Like they
Absolutely.
can they can get up and pick off a couple people. And Notre Dame's a team like that also, which Louisville goes to Notre Dame on February 16th. That would be one that you would really like to have Chucky Hepburn back for, especially considering Marcus Burton is now healthy again, and he is a damn good basketball player as well. You would like to have Chucky to take the majority of possessions guarding, at least initially, Marcus Burton there to where that's the challenge for Louisville. Not so much Miami, because Miami's kind of in the spot that Louisville was in the past couple years to where they're like 5-18 right now. The coach already quit the season, Jim Larrañaga. They have some talent, but it's like
They do
they
have a
just look
little
like, yeah,
talent,
yeah,
and as coaches, the don't care teams are the ones you kind of worry about the most, because when the teams come in and they're like, "Wow, you're playing someone who really doesn't care," and not to knock those players, but it's almost like the season's a wash and they're just playing, and it's almost like they're just playing almost too free, and all of a sudden they can just get on the run, or you just from the get-go you just take all their spirit away is
yeah.
what you want to do, and you want to come out strong. And obviously, look, if Chucky's not there, that just starts, because he's just a hound, and he's just not going to let you get into stuff. So there's other guys that will pick it up, but you just want to have him for everything. You just don't want to lose him, especially with the rhythm he's playing in and how
Yeah.
well the team is playing. That's a guy you certainly can't lose for a stretch, but you certainly want to have him because they're just so rhythmic, and the synergy they have when he's on the floor is just so different.
Yeah. Well, what it is worth saying, I'm not a big, like, I don't care a lot about the postseason awards and all that stuff. It kind of, if a guy from a team I like wins, like, yay, good. Let's move on. But you congratulate them. It's fun, whatever. I don't understand how Chucky Hepburn isn't on the Bob Cousy Award, top 10 or whatever it is list. I mean, I get there's a lot of really good guards in college basketball this year. Cam Jones been spectacular, Braden Smith, all these guys,
Mm-hmm.
but you look at how Chucky impacts a game on both ends of the floor. I know this is far from the first time I've said it on this podcast, and to you as well. I don't understand how you can look at him and say he's not one of the top 10 best guards in the country. I think he's a lot closer to, 2 or 3, and probably not second or third on that list than being outside of that top 10 to me. I just a lot of great guards in college basketball. I don't get how he's not on that list with how much he impacts the game on both ends of the floor. I don't think there's another point guard that Cam Jones is the only one I can think of that can impact a game on both ends of the floor like Chucky Hepburn does.
I couldn't concur more, but I'm also a guy that has never been um, consumed or even just infatuated with those awards and that kind of stuff. To me,
Right.
it's just about the team and winning and that kind of stuff. I'm sure at the end of the season, Coach Kelsey is going to put together some sort of amazing award or trophy just for him, and understanding that. Again, if you take Cooper Flag out, he's the ACC Player of the Year, and it's just it's a shame that he's not getting recognized at the same time. You can almost tell this is the type of young man who just he gets it. He's not worried about those type of things. It's all about winning, and it's all about how well he just impacts his team. And again, the way he's shooting the basketball and the way he's a threat now, it's incredible. Just the way he can stretch it now as a point guard. You can't play off him anymore. I mean, he's just knocking it down consistently.
Yeah, I mean, you look at, again, start of the Boston College game. What sparked Louisville's first kind of 12-0
Yep.
kill shot was leaning back into ball pressure, all that stuff. Boston College wasn't pressuring the ball. Chucky's like, yeah, I'm comfortable. I'll just hit splash 2 threes. Why not?
Yeah, that's it.
Like,
I mean, in last game, look, he's 24 minutes. He's 5 for 10, 2 for 4 from the 3-point line. I mean, those are in the first half, but regardless, I mean, I mean, what he could do, and he's always filling up numbers. I mean, whether it's assists and he had 3 assists and rebounds and steals. I mean, he's a stat stuffer in a good way. I mean, he's just doing things, and it's just he's affecting the game in so many ways. But if you just watch him play, you realize the impact he has. That he just takes teams out of stuff when there's a turnover. That's a credit to him just because of things he's done on the defensive end, and then offensively, his ability now to just snake players and to his navigation of ball screens. I mean, that was maybe not a knock, but obviously Wisconsin he wasn't in that a lot there. The way he navigates and utilizes ball screens and understands angles is phenomenal.
Yeah, but it'll be Louisville can't survive without him long. I mean, that's not an insult to any of the other guys on the team. Just when you have a guy that impacts the game in that many ways, you got to have him to play the best basketball that you're capable of.
No
Cards
question.
take on Miami tomorrow on Saturday. Should be a fun one, honoring the 2005 Final Four team, a team that I grew up with. That was one of the first teams I really remember, that Taekwon Dean, Francisco Garcia era. That was one of the jokes I made a couple weeks ago when Hepburn set the assist record. Ray Smith set the single game 3 record, taking out Garcia and Dean from those records for 20 plus years. I'm like, damn, they're ripping my childhood out of the record. But that'll be cool for people my age, especially, to see some of those guys back. That was a very beloved team for kind of our first taste of a deep tournament run for Louisville basketball.
Sure.
So that'll be a lot of fun there as well. That's all we got for today. We'll be back next week reacting to Louisville, Miami, Notre Dame. As we trudge through February here, tough stretch for Louisville, not in terms of quality of opponent as much, but you got to stay locked in. You can't avoid as many slip ups. That Georgia Tech one was kind of the leeway you had there. So they got to keep things locked in. Hopefully get Chucky Hepburn back. Coach, always appreciate the time. It's always a blast. I love it. I learn more doing this podcast with you than I learn, excuse me, if anyone else. Ball more than anyone else in the city. And you're a great guy to work with. That's why we keep having you co-host this thing with me, man. It's an absolute blast. I really do appreciate, because I know you're coaching Holy Cross. You're in the weeds, coaching your team, that you're able to find and make time for us on the podcast. It really does mean a lot to me, Coach.
Well, the feeling is mutual. I think the world of you, Jack, and I appreciate your patience and understanding that I have. If you're going to do something, I'm not a half measures guy, and just trying to be locked in to build what we're doing here, but also loved analyzing college basketball, especially Louisville basketball, with you, Jack.
Of course, Coach. We'll always keep having fun with this, man. I have an absolute blast. We'll be back